It's the Blues Rock Show with Pete Francis and Willie Witten.
Welcome to the first ever edition of the Blues Rock Show. I'm Pete Francis, joined by Willie Witten. We're here to discuss everything and anything that is blues rock. And today we're going to start with online pay-per-view shows. There's a huge trend right now with not being able to play concerts in person, so it's going online. We're seeing this with a lot of different artists, and not necessarily just grabbing a cell phone, but getting professional audio, professional video. And we're seeing this from bands like the Allman Betts Band, Larkin Poe, Eric Gales. Joe Bonmasssa just did an online pay-per-view. So Willie, the first question is, what are your thoughts on online pay-per-views as sort of the future of touring?
Well, I think that there's really two sides of this. You know, it's not straightforward. Certainly right now, it's a necessity. The artists need to make money. They need to stay afloat. And fans are rabid at the moment for being sort of shut out of the entire summer season. I think in that regard, it's great. Certainly in the present, Joe Bonmasssa just put on a pretty darn good show, I thought. And other people are going to continue to do this. It started before. I think it's going to gain some traction. I think in general, going forward, even after things clear up, I think it's a good addition to the concert scene. Let's face it, traffic can be really difficult if you're in a city. Some people are working from home. Some people have families. So I can go and catch a Wednesday night show, no problem. It doesn't bother me. But being able to watch from your home, for some people, that's the only way. It's the only way to stay in touch if they're touring, if they're overseas. So I think it's great. My only concern, and it's a real concern, is that it can be really convenient. So convenient to the degree that there's a little bit of an anxiety in me that this could supplant going to the show. I think that would be a huge loss for just music and the art form in general. So I guess I hope that kids, younger people get to go out to the show and be out with the people and see it live and hear it live. I think there's something irreplaceable about that. But honestly, I think all in all, it's a good thing. And we knew this was eventually going to happen at some point. I think the pandemic's just pushed it a bit forward.
Yeah, I agree. And they had to do something, right? Because musicians just can't wait forever. They've got bills to pay, and they've got to go ahead and do something. So it was really interesting to watch Joe Bonmassa's online pay-per-view because he really did it in a real professional manner, really high quality production. And I thought, for the most part, I thought it was great. Obviously, with the live streams, it is very awkward after each song when there's no applause. Don't get me wrong there. I think they did a pretty good job with dimming the lights, though, during that moment. It did take some of that attention off of it. But whether it's his concert or anyone else's online live concert, it is awkward when there is no fans. And I don't think you can replicate the feeling of being at an online show. But right now, the reality is, especially for someone like Joe who plays 2,000, 3,000 seat theaters, he's not going to be touring anytime soon. That's just kind of what the reality is, not the way that he was doing it before. So I think it is a viable option right now, and it gives musicians another income stream.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I thought the same things that you just said. I felt the same way about the show. Incredibly high production value. It was very serious. They seem to have went out as if there were 2,000 to 3,000 people there. They cannot help what they cannot help. The fact that there's no one there, that's not their fault. I thought the show was great. Always professional, some great tunes. So.
And honestly, Willie, I'd be okay with them funneling in crowd noise after each song. You see like the NFL's doing it. I would be okay with that.
I think, yeah, I would be okay with that too, provided that it doesn't happen simultaneously with panning to a crowd with no one there.
Yeah, but I mean, if they dim the lights, right, but they keep the view on the stage, I think it would work great.
I think so too. And you know what? I think that, there's Joe and some other people are a bit of the canaries in the coal mine. There will be advances, not just technologically, but also in the human feeling sense of it too. So I also think it's important that if people do turn into a live stream now and they don't love it, don't give up. I mean, this is the beginning. It will get better. These musicians are committed. They need it.
Yeah, and for Bonmasssa for first effort, I think it was terrific.
Yeah, I do too.
All right, switching gears right now, we're going to talk Spotify. And Spotify CEO Daniel Ek recently made some comments that were a bit controversial. And basically the gist of what he said was musicians need to release albums more often than every 3 to 4 years if they want to stay relevant. So Willie, what are your thoughts on his comments?
Once again, there's two sides to this. The right off the bat, as tough as it is, two things in this side of the comment is one, Mr. Eck is the CEO of Spotify. Spotify seems to be doing well. I don't think they're going anywhere soon. So his comments are maybe more controversial because they carry so much weight. In our society, things change in an instant. People have very short memories, attention spans. So yeah, I cannot disagree with what he said. He is correct. Not just for his platform, but I think that for most listeners in general, or certainly a larger group. So with that, I think that I have no argument. But there's a bit of the tone that's a little bit overbearing.
People don't like the tone.
Right. Because, and I think that's maybe not even so much the tone, but we know who he is. We know what he is able to control. He is in a way somewhat of a gatekeeper. It's hard to say, it's hard to shun Spotify. Even those who have big, gigantic acts have eventually come around. So I think the problem with the tone is, in a perfect world, I would like it if the artists can release music as they see fit, as works for their budget, etc. At the same time, I guess that I'm from a generation that grew up on albums, and I like the idea of an album, but maybe that's not where music is going in the near future. You know, maybe Mr. Eck is thinking that, hey, stay relevant. Maybe staying relevant doesn't mean releasing an opus every 3 years. Maybe it's more just, hey, a small snippet of 4 songs you did at a show that you've put out, or maybe singles. So I don't know. Maybe with the right attitude, it's not as overbearing of a comment. Maybe he's signaling a shift that's already taking place in the industry.
Yeah, we have kind of moved towards a singles sort of world, and we definitely live in a what have you done for me lately sort of world. And artists that aren't constantly putting out new music, they're going to get left behind. And that's kind of one of the unfortunate things with the fact that everyone's attention span today is just so short that people don't have the same patience these days. And when you have access to pretty much any song or album in the world immediately, right, you know, it's kind of on to the next thing because you have access to everything already. So that does make things very difficult. But I do see the point where you have to be constantly engaging your audience. You can't be sitting at home and never posting on Facebook or sending out email newsletters or, you know, posting on Instagram. You have to be constantly engaging with your audience, giving your audience something, because if you don't, they're going to forget about you, because today, more than ever, there are so many different entertainment options. And if you're not constantly engaging your audience, you will get left behind.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I also wonder a bit, there's a little bit of a side angle to this. I think different genres will have different approaches and different comfort levels. I think certainly the pop genre is naturally more predisposed to this. If you look back, you know, before your time and my time, it was singles. It was singles on the radio. And, you know, if you sort of equate the radio to Spotify, they're sort of serving as the same thing now. Pop, I think, can make this transition. I feel like it might be harder for people who are in the blues rock, who are used to a longer format. You know, Walter Trout can go ahead and release an album every year. He's been doing it before CDs were even around. Forget MP3s or Spotify. But for most people, especially in the blues category, I feel like that's a little tougher. I don't know how that translates, but I guess it looks like it's going to get pushed that way.
Yeah, and whether you like it or not, Spotify is pretty much the gatekeeper these days.
Yeah.
All right, so moving forward, we're going to talk about Greta Van Fleet. And obviously, Greta Van Fleet is a very polarizing band. Everyone seems to have an opinion on them because they sound a lot like Led Zeppelin. For some people, that's a good thing. For some people, that's a bad thing. Willie, do you think they're good for blues rock and rock and roll?
I think they're better than good. I think they're great. And I know it's my first basic point to that is if you get people listening, that's a good thing. If you draw attention to what you're doing musically for the right reasons, which is the music, and I think that's a great thing. Because for every 5-10 people who really love something that's a little more commercially accessible, like Greta Van Fleet, there's going to be some people that are going to say, hey, I think I've heard these guys before. Oh, they sound a bit like Zeppelin. And then if you go to Zeppelin, there's going to be a couple people who are going to say, hey, how did these guys start? And then you're going to get deeper into the blues. So, we were talking about gatekeepers. I feel like Greta Van Fleet is perhaps a gateway. And they are perhaps serve as a gateway to listeners. I understand. I don't agree. But I do get the idea that, wow, they do sound an awful lot like Zepp. But I think there's a big difference here. They write their own material.
And they do write good songs.
I agree. I think their songs are great. The way I judge a lot of songs sometimes is how many times do I listen to it in a row before I get tired of it. And a couple of theirs I've had on repeat for a while. I think that their vibe is sort of lifted from Zeppelin, but they have written their own. Zeppelin, not as much. So I think that maybe cut these guys some slack, enjoy the music for what it is, which I think is great, and be happy that maybe there's a band out there who is young, vibrant, and commercially successful that is bringing people hopefully back into the blues.
And many times, Willie, the same people who are kind of trashing Greta Van Fleet are the same people that are saying, how come there isn't any good music in the mainstream anymore? And then when a band like Greta Van Fleet gets in the mainstream, they just trash them.
Right, exactly. It's like, here it is. This is right. You can't have it both ways. Or I guess you can look to have it both ways, but you'll always be disappointed. I don't see anything. They certainly seem to love what they're doing too. It seems authentic. You can, believe it or not, you can be authentic and commercially successful. It's often a rarity, but it can happen. And I think they've achieved that. So kudos to them. I hope they continue.
And if you've ever been to one of their shows, they've got young people, they've got older people. It's a very eclectic mix. And there's not a lot of artists that can do that can draw from both audiences. And what you said, Willie, about them being a gateway band, I totally agree. If someone gets into Greta Van Fleet, and because of that, then they discover Rival Sons, and then they discover Philip Sayce, that's a great thing that you can have a band like that lure more people in to a genre that desperately needs more people to listen to it.
I agree. And I think that deep in their hearts, most listeners would agree. Name your bands that you love. My guess is those first songs that brought you in weren't the ones on the second half of the albums. They were the ones that were on the radio repeatedly, that were catchy, that were accessible to everyone. And it just so happened that it hit a nerve. That's how you got to the backsides. That's how you got into the other recordings, the studio sessions. You don't start there. You got to start somewhere. And for some people, that may be Greta Van Fleet. And I think that's awesome. I like the guys.
And we want to hear what you guys have to say. So please leave your comments down in the comments section below. And also make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We're going to have new episodes every single week. But for now, he's Willie Witten. I'm Pete Francis. We'll see you next time.